Howdy folks, Dr. Lane back here again with another 2026 Peaks Challenge. I guess this one's the training video and it's kind of, are you ready? And it really is all about where you are in your training right now and if that is actually enough to get you through the demands of Peaks Challenge. So what I'm going to do in this video is run you through some of the key metrics that I think really give us an objective measure of whether you're ready to get through the Peaks Challenge course. So here we go. There's three things we know about Peaks Challenge really. We know the distance, it's 235 Ks. We know the climbing is about 4,500 meters. And of course the time is up to you and how fast you can go. But the other metric that is pretty common across everybody who does Peaks Challenge is how many kilojoules of work it takes to get around the course. And regardless of whether you go 8 hours or whether you go 13 hours, it takes a certain amount of energy, which is in this case, kilojoules is measured off your power meter on your bike. I know how many kilojoules it takes a certain rider to get around. So here we go. Now, the main thing about this to remember is, of course, a bigger rider has more gravity against them. A smaller rider has less. A bigger rider also has more wind resistance when they're on the flat. And the thing you can actually change about that one is whether you're in the wind or whether you're not in the wind, saving energy on a wheel. So my example for myself here is, here's me from 4 years of Peaks Challenge, 2018 to 2021. You can see pretty consistently I am burning about 5,500 kilojoules to get around in about 8 hours. So funnily enough, that number wouldn't change if I did it in 10 hours. It would still take me about 5,500 calories, because what would happen is if I did it in 10 hours, my rate of energy expenditure per hour, because I'm going not as hard, would just be pushed out over a longer period of time. So regardless of whether I do it in 8 or 12, it's going to be about 5,500 kilojoules of work for me. And the main point this translates to is, in training, are your big rides hitting anywhere near this target? So let me give you the next example of another guy I used to coach. 11 hours 15 he did it in. There you go, about the same amount of kilojoules of work for this rider. So again, the course itself takes about 5,500 kilojoules of work. Now he's an average weighted guy, similar to me. I'd say about 70 kilos is average. What about a big guy? And this guy I used to coach is absolutely amazing. He did the course in under 8 hours, 7 hours 37. He's 90 kilos. His normalized power is nearly 300 watts to get his big body around that course. And of course, that uses more power. So he used 6,700 kilojoules of work to get around the course. And that's actually the most I've ever seen anyone do to get around. Here's conversely a smaller rider. Someone I used to coach, 65 kilos, and they still did a sub 9 hour. But because he's smaller, and this guy was pretty smart, he sat in the group as well, but he's very light, so he climbed at a lower power than some people might be. But he's sub 9 hours, and he only used 4,900 kilojoules of work. So here my example is, the heavier you are, the more kilojoules you're likely to use. But in my next slide, you'll see this is actually me. And I've actually ridden the Peaks course twice already in the last 2 months, just for a bit of a training ride, as you do. One was me in a group of about 15 of us. And I did about 8:07 for the loop ride time. And I did 5,500 kilojoules of work in a group. And that's the same as what I am when I'm at Peaks Challenge. I tend to be on the front a fair bit more, but I tend to also get a break because I'm in a group. The second example is me solo with actually one other rider. And we worked pretty hard. We did about the same ride time, but because I was pushing the wind, basically for the whole route myself, I did another 500 plus kilojoules of work. So let's think of that as wind resistance sitting in the wind. So it's my example here is if you can be in a group and sit in, you'll save energy. And what does that energy mean? It means you'll have more for later on in the ride. And that is the big problem when you get to the back of falls, is that most people are kind of already emptied their energy tank. So the back of falls is pretty hard. But, if you got to the back of falls doing less amount of kilojoules, you'd probably get up there a hell of a lot easier. Okay, so what is next? In your training, you should have a good progression in the amount of work you do in your big rides as time goes on. And this is my example of someone who I've been coaching since back in November. And you can see the clear trajectory of me giving them the right sessions, that over time, as they get fitter and can handle it better, they're doing more and more kilojoules, working towards our target of, if let's say someone's going to be doing 5,500 kilojoules at peaks, I wouldn't expect you to do that in a training ride, but we want to be maybe about 80% of it. So you'd want to get to about 4,000 kilojoules of work in training. And here's the big point. You want to be able to get home from that and still be alive and not be completely dead, knowing that you've got a little bit more in the tank, because on the day you're going to need that little bit more. So the purpose of my example here is you build your training rides up, and this is what my next slide is. Build your training rides up to a specific target that's relative to you. So what I do for my athletes at the moment is give them a target. I say, go out and map a ride, and this is a really good idea. Map a ride on Strava, so you're not just making it up as you go. Map a ride that has a certain vert target. So you might have to do loops or repeats of the same climb in your area to get to that, let's say 3,000 meter target. Go get that ride done. Don't worry about the duration target. Just get either the vert done or the total amount of kilojoules done, and let the time take care of itself. The faster rider you are, the faster you'll get through the vert and the kilojoules, therefore your time will be less. So if you're a slower rider, to get through those targets, it might be a longer training ride. So my example here is I give an approximately 6-hour training ride with a vert target of 3,000 meters, because that's where the athlete's up to at the moment, or a 4,000 kilojoule target, because I know that's a little bit more than what they've done in the past. So why is this important? So this chart shows on the left, you can see someone from 2025 that I didn't coach at this time. In 2025, they had a pretty bad day at peaks because I think they just weren't ready. And if you look at how big their kilojoules were in their training rides, they did some up around 3,000 kilojoules, but at peaks they're doing 5,500. So their training rides just were still not big enough to get their body ready for that big day of 5,500 kilojoules of work at peaks. This year on the right-hand side is where I've been coaching them now since back in November, December, and I've been increasing their kilojoules as time goes on. So we've got another month to go. I would like to see maybe 2 more rides that exceed what they've already done now, which is already bigger than what they did in their training last year. So this all applies to everybody. You should be periodizing your program, and now is the time to go jump on Training Peaks or Strava and see what your biggest rides have been, and try and make sure that the next couple of rides are a little bit bigger if you haven't already hit the target. Like a lot of people have already gone out and they've hit the target that I want them to, which might be, let's say, 4,000 kilojoules and 3,500 meters of climbing. And now I'm trying to encourage them to do that a little bit faster than what they did last time. So what I've been doing is asking people to go do exactly the same route as they did maybe a month ago and try and do it faster. Set yourself a goal. Can I get around half an hour faster than last time? And this is a good mentality for peaks training as well. Okay, so my targets, I think, are roughly this. So where should you be right now? I think for peaks, you don't want to go out and ride a 230 kilometer route in training. Maybe you have if it's really flat, but the target should be about, let's say, 80% of what peaks actually is. So I think that works out to be 170 to 200 kilometers for most people. You want to go out and do a ride of about 3,600 up to 5,200, depending upon the size of rider you are. If you're a small rider, let's say 3.5 to maybe 4 at the most. If you're a big rider with a higher power output, you may be wanting to be aiming for that 5 to 6,000 kilojoules in a ride. How long should your longest ride be? I would say it's about 80% of the time you think you're going to take to get around peaks. And I've tried to answer that question in another video with all my pacing charts. If you haven't seen it, go see that one as well. So there you go. I think the last thing to answer here is, how hard should you be going trying to hit these targets in training? And whenever a time someone says to me, how hard should I be going in this training ride? I say, go your peaks pace. And by now, you should have done enough training to know what your highest sustainable pace feels like whenever you're doing a long climb, whether it's a repeats of a short and moderate climb, like 10 minutes, 20 minutes, or you've got access to a longer climb that's, an hour long. I would say do your training ride so it replicates Peaks Challenge. And that to me would be, and this is my example for myself, when I ride Toowoomba at Peaks Challenge, I tend to ride like about 90% of my FTP roughly. So in training, I'm going out doing a bit of a hard start while I've got fresh legs. I might do 20 minutes at 90%. And then I go, okay, that's Toowoomba done. My next climb is going to be a little bit less and I'll settle into my pace for the day. So I then tend to do the bulk of my climbing at kind of like 80 to 85% of my FTP. Then as time goes on and I get tighter and tighter, let's say 5-6 hours in, let's say it's getting a bit hot, and then you picture it's the back of falls. So then when you get tired, no one really is going to do the same power as they did on Toowoomba as they're going to do up the back of falls. So I think if you fall into the range of about 70 to 80% when you're 6 to 8 hours into your ride and you're going up your final climbs, 70 to 80% is perfectly fine. And one more tip, if you're doing it in training, try and find a steep hill at the end of your climb to try and do it on, because it will be harder to do the power on a steep one than it will be on a moderate climb. And of course, that's what the back of falls is. So folks, there's my little tips for are you ready for peaks? And I think some of the numbers you should be trying to hit in your final month of training. The rule here is you get through this ride, it's about 80% of all these numbers. And you come home with more in the tank. You're not a mess. You come home with confidence that if I kept eating and I kept drinking and I had my short rest somewhere, I could get through another couple of hours, I'd be okay. And that's really the point of what your training rides is. You get to a certain point, you're still okay. On the day, you do it once, and it's the biggest one you've ever done. All right, folks, that's it. Safe training. I hope it's all going well, and I'll see you up at Falls Creek.